So Mehmood, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of technology. But before we go into technology, can you tell us a little bit more about your own background? Where did you grow up?
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for the opportunity. Grew up in South Africa, a town called Nelspruit. Well, it was a small town back then, but now it's the capital of Mpumalanga. Very much Eastern Transvaal. Those days, lots of outdoors kind of thing, and sun, which I miss. Hopefully, I'll go back there one day.
And when did you move to Gauteng?
University. So As soon as I got into university, I did a BSc in mathematics and computer science, and moved up to do my degree at WITS.
And can you tell us what was your dream career when you grew up?
Honestly, well, it started out, I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer in my early days. But then around the time I was 14 or 15, I got introduced to computers. And I just wanted to be a developer. I didn't want anything more than that. I was very keen just to play around with technology at the time. So it was a passion of mine. And I was hoping that after university I could help companies develop software. That was really what I had in mind. Nothing more than that.
And is that how you started at SAP?
No. So I started as a Java developer for Anderson at the time, and then did some work for some of the big five, but very quickly kind of got into management consulting, ID strategy, that kind of stuff. When, especially as we were leading, it was just after Y2K, and a lot of companies had spent a lot of money on trying to save themselves from Y2K. So after that, the question is, we made all of these investments, what do we do? So I found that I had a ability to build a vision, build roadmaps for companies, and that's what I got into. So when SAP started building a team that was focused on building the future for their customers, that's when I joined to start that team.
And then today you are the Chief Operating Officer of SAP Africa. Can you tell us a little bit of what does this entail?
Sure. It's a bit of an amorphous role, to be quite honest. It deals with operations, which I think is the easy part, the day-to-day running of the organization. But it also has to do with building the strategy, building how we define ourselves in terms of our go-to-market, where do we invest, and then there's a lot of special projects as well when it comes to introducing new technologies into the market, and some of the special projects we have in Africa, for example, building the skills base, etc. So it's quite broad, but it has to do with both operations and strategy. I like that because you get to do the day-to-day stuff, make sure the engine is running, but also ensure that you have a 24, 36 month kind of outlook, which I enjoy.
And Mehmood, looking back at your career, who inspired you to go the extra mile?
Well, there are many people. I think it comes down to, in every role that I've had, in every job, in every company that I've worked for, they've always been people that I learned a lot from. One of the things I learned very early on was work ethic, which I think is absolutely critical in this environment. And I think that with a built-in curiosity, I think in this industry you have to be curious. And I found that the one great thing about working at SAP is you have a lot of curious people, which means we like to find out new things, we like to do new things, we like to drive things forward. So it's not just my mentors or my leaders. What inspires me is the fact that every day I come to work, the people at SAP are quite passionate about this. Everybody from your most junior developer to the most senior executive has this passion. So that helps me. No individual, it's just everybody that I've worked with. I've been quite lucky.
And looking back at your career, would you say there was a turning point?
I would say so. I think, probably every kind of role that I've had has been pretty much, I would say, being in the right place at the right time, to be quite honest. But I think the one thing that really gave me a lot of experience is when SAP was starting up its operation in the Middle East. And at the time, SAP was very small in the Middle East. Nobody really wanted the role. So I applied for it, and I got it simply because I was the only candidate. But that taught me a great deal in terms of working in an environment that is very fast-paced and moving forward, and having to essentially have a startup mentality. Right. Because there was literally 8 of us. Office was smaller than the boardroom we're sitting in right now. And then to grow that to a 600-man organization and being the leading provider of applications in the Middle East was, I learned something, because every year the business was completely different. You had a different stage of development. So when I came back home, I brought a lot of that experience, and I think it helped me quite a bit. Yeah.
And Mehmood, what is driving you today?
I think that if you look at the last 10 years of what's happened I'm not going to say technology, but just in terms of the lives of people, so much has changed. You go back to 2007, no one had a smartphone. No one could communicate the way they communicate. Citizens and consumers didn't have the freedom that they have now and the power that they have now. And so much of that has changed. But I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see even bigger changes to the way we live our lives. And what drives me is to use all of those, because technological innovation for itself means absolutely nothing. But if you can change people's lives and improve people's lives, that makes a big difference. And that's what inspires me to continue.
Now, Mehmood, let's talk about the future, and specifically the future of technology. And I know this is a big question, but I have to ask it. What does the future of technology mean to you?
Well, it's not really one thing. But there are a couple of themes, I think, that will drive it. The first one is the way that humans interact with technology. The consumerization of technology and the way we as people consume it's going to change drastically. We've seen already the emergence of different interfaces. For many years there's a screen and a keyboard, right? Whether it be a physical keyboard or a virtual keyboard, it's always been the same way. But I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a completely different way we interact with technology. It's going to be a lot more based on natural language. It's going to be based on the application of artificial intelligence into the interface and the way we work. I personally don't think we're that far away from augmenting ourselves with technology so that we have a more intimate relationship with the rest of the world. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. I think we're already seeing it with things like Alexa and Siri and Google now, but the applications are endless. Whether we're going to interact with our cars, or whether we're going to interact with our homes, or whether we're going to interact with completely self-sufficient systems out there that would help us live our lives. I think that's going to change dramatically. And it's not that far away. We've done a lot of work in SAP around integrating our systems with these kind of natural language processing systems. It just changes the way that you run your business, as an example, right? You can ask the system in natural language to pull out a few CVs that you think would be good for a role, and it would automatically do that without typing anything in. Right? So that's the first thing. I talked about artificial intelligence. I mean, it's a big buzzword, but I think the application of that intelligence into things we do every day is going to make a big difference to our lives. The connection between artificial intelligence and the devices that we use every day, I think, is going to change our lives as well. We look at the way transport will be handled in the future, self-driving cars as an example of that, whether it be artificial intelligence built into our fridges and our toasters. I think the playing around with the technology phase is over. And now it's about actually putting that technology to work in everyday life. You're going to see a lot more of that. the value of data, and I think this is something that people don't understand. I don't think anybody gets how valuable data is going to become. The most valuable commodity in the world today is not oil, it's not gold, it's data. And we have a lot of work to do to put all of that data together and make it applicable for the new world. But once we do that, the person who owns the data, the person who can understand that data the best, will have a competitive advantage over everyone else. So that is going to be very important for us. And then finally, with all of that data, security is very important. I believe that security is going to become a lot more important for technology as we move forward. Or whether it be for a government, a business, or an individual, it is going to be the most critical thing. So security is not going to be an afterthought. It is going to be built into a lot of technology. That is going to be the first thing you think about. Because if data is the most valuable thing, you as a person or you as an organization are going to be represented by the data that you have. And we've seen what's happened recently with the use of social media data and what that means for individuals and how it can influence the outcome of world events. So privacy and security will play a much bigger role. And then finally, I think, as always, things might happen with technology that we don't yet grasp. I think people who talk about the future of technology and say, this is how it's going to pan out in 10 years, I think are fooling themselves. It's always young, innovative people that are going to change the world. I look at the young people in South Africa today, and I think the way that they're taking up technology and using technology is going to result in solutions and ways of life that we probably can't grasp right now. So we'll have to see what the next 10 years hold, but I think it's going to be very exciting.
Now, talking about future technology leaders, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future technology leaders or future leaders?
I spoke about the two things, but what I value quite a lot, and I think what helps you succeed is two very simple things. Always be ready to learn new things. If you want to become a leader in technology, then you need to understand this is one industry that does not stay still. Things change all the time, and you need to embrace new things, new ideas, new thinking. And by the way, because technology is so personal these days, you actually need to embrace new cultural norms when it comes to the use of technology. That will make you understand how to apply that technology and how to lead people from a technology perspective. The other thing is work ethic, right? We are more than ever living in a globalized world. And for us to stay competitive, we need to really work very hard. Curiosity is great, but then to actually do something with that means that you need to put in the hours. You need to work very hard. Collaboration is something that springs to mind as well. I think more and more technology is not something that can be. It's not an individual thing. It's based on teams that exist all over the world. You have to collaborate with people to make something successful. Even at SAP, by the way, we are only successful because of our ecosystem, our partners, sometimes our competitors, right? Independents out there, our customers. We all have to work together to make something successful. And I think if you cannot be an island, that's very important as well.
Now, Mehmood, when you speak to future leaders, and maybe even your children, what do you tell them they should focus on for future-proofing their career, if that is possible?
It's difficult to future-proof your career if you focus only on one thing because you don't know what is going to be relevant or not. Like I said, stay curious. I started out thinking I was going to be a C++ developer for the rest of my life, and potentially looking at computers as a paradigm back in the late 1990s is very different to today. So you have to continuously learn. As long as you're continuously learning, I think you're in good shape. What is also important, I think, is that people do what they love doing. At the end of the day, you have to be inspired by what you're doing. Technology is not something, I don't think technology is a career. I think everything you do today, technology plays a part in it. But if you're going to drive technology as a future, then for me, it's really about learning new things all the time. The most successful people that I've seen, in SAP at least, are people that are ahead of the curve. People who pick up things early on and drive them. As long as you drive them from a non-theoretical perspective and say, how is this going to change the world? Then I think you're in good shape.
And Mehmood, what are the key technologies that you envisage will be driving the future of humanity, the future of the planet?
So it's things that many people talk about already, right? When you talk about artificial intelligence, that's going to drive things, but it's not going to drive things in terms of a computer. It's going to drive your car. It's going to drive your fridge. It's going to drive the way you interact with other people. It's going to drive the way you interact with companies. And together with robotics, I think that's going to play a big role. Blockchain, I think, is going to play a big role when it comes to security and data privacy. Again, blockchain on its own doesn't make a lot of sense, but when you say, well, I can actually create a title deed using blockchain, right? And I can ensure that people who don't have access to land, which is a big issue in our country, and we can secure that through the use of blockchain technology, so that it becomes easier for people to acquire and trade in land. That changes the game significantly, because now I've got collateral, right? So it's the application of these kind of technologies. I think if you have the ability to understand data, analytics, I still believe, plays a big role in the future of technology, because companies need to understand all of the data, whether it is structured or unstructured data, to be able to make decisions. So those three things are going to drive the future of technology. Cloud, in my view, is not a future technology. It exists today. All we need to do is make sure that we revise all of our technology architecture so that they are cloud native, because it is real. And all of the regulations, all of the issues around cloud, we're going to get over them. But we cannot stay up to date if we have a legacy approach. We have to understand that cloud allows us to be a lot more flexible, a lot more quicker, as we deliver new solutions to the problems that we face, whether we're individuals or organizations.
Now, Mehmood, when it comes to social media, how do you suggest future leaders should handle social media? What platforms should they use? What platforms should they focus on? And how should they make sure that they grow their personal brand and their leadership rather than diminish it?
I think this is something that we need to actually spend time in educating people on. Everybody uses social media, but we don't exactly know how to do it properly. One of the things around education is we miss this fact. I don't think companies train people enough on how to use social media, and that can result in a lot of problems. I'm not going to talk about which platforms you should or you shouldn't use, because I think there are different requirements for different organizations. You see a lot of SMEs that have a significant presence on Facebook, because it is a very effective way of building your brand without all of the investment required in websites and traditional marketing. So, there's a great opportunity for that. Building personal brands I think is a tricky one, because when you use platforms like Twitter, etc., it can backfire on you. I think the thing is, what we need is more of our communication and marketing organizations to actually put strategies around that. So it's not a one size fits all thing. It's something that you would have to do on an individual basis, but it's something that you need to think about. Sit with your marketing team, sit with your communications team, and say, how do I go about this? What are the right tools? When do I do it? I would say the one thing that for me is a little bit disappointing is most people today just retweet stuff. It's not original thought. And that's most of what our marketing and our communications teams want us to do. What we need to do is we need to put our own thoughts out there. As long as it's measured, it makes a lot of sense, and it represents the values of you as a person and as the company. I think that's a lot more effective. People want to hear what you have to say rather than what the latest headline is from the company's PR department. That we need to get away from a little bit, because it adds just too much noise in the system and doesn't actually tell you what you're really on about.
Now, Mehmood, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story with us where you mentored somebody and that person took your advice to heart?
Okay, there's quite a few. Again, some people will take different advice. I think I've mentored a few people where really it's about encouraging them to try new things, take some risks in a structured manner. I've had a few people that they grow up in South Africa, they understand the South African context, but to really be globally competitive, you need to experience the rest of the world. I've seen some of them where I've said, go spend a couple of years and then come back home. And the different perspectives that they pick up by going somewhere else and coming back, they can add a lot more to our economy. And they've moved up, in SAP, so that's been very positive. We have a young team at SAP that is we call it our SAP lab, and these are very young people, come out of university, and what I've spent a lot of time with them is to talk about just go wild, do what you think is best, don't be limited by the corporate kind of paradigm that you fit into, because you are the future. You need to show us. It's not just about how SAP can teach you what to do, but it's about what you can teach SAP from your experiences. And this team has grown from strength to strength, and they're regarded as the best SAP lab, at least in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I haven't seen the rest of the world, but they're pretty much up there. And the reason is because they've taken that to heart, and they've just, they've been very innovative in the things that they've done. Completely different to how SAP would have tackled it previously. It's that freedom of spirit. It comes with the curiosity, it comes with the hard work, but it says, I'm not going to be held back by what the guidebook tells me to do. I'm going to do something completely different. And they've done, they've done some practical things like, with retailers, how does a retailer become a renter of space to its suppliers? They figured that out, and it's young people because they have a different paradigm. So I've been very proud of that in the fact that they've been free to do what they want to do.
Is that your co-innovation lab?
No, it's not the co-innovation lab. So this is a lab that deals with solutions. We've got a lot of labs in SAP. So the co-innovation lab deals with partners, and there we have to be structured, because what we're doing there is we're building solutions that are going to be commercially viable for our partners. And we have a responsibility to our partners. The partners would come with an idea, we'd help them develop it. This is really around more bleeding edge stuff that says, what is next for SAP? We don't worry about how much revenue you bring in or how much customers you're touching. Come up with 100 ideas that are absolutely out of this world. Only 2 are ever going to see reality, but you need to give them the freedom to be able to do that. Otherwise, you don't get the innovation. So it's a different thing. Ultimately, some of that results in going to the co-innovation lab, but most of it is purely experimental.
Okay. Now, Mehmood, who are the role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and maybe learn from?
It depends. It depends what you're looking for. I think leadership for me is all about people. It's about how to get the best out of your teams, out of your peers, out of your leaders. And if I look at I think we have enough examples in South Africa. I don't think you have to necessarily go outside of the country. I think we need to go back. I think a lot of people have forgotten the leadership that existed in South Africa in the early 90s when we went through the most difficult time ever. So it's going to be the obvious ones, right? It's about all of our, people like Nelson Mandela. People, I mean, that for me was all about leadership. It wasn't about politics. It was about navigating an entire organization, and in this case, that organization was South Africa Inc. through the most difficult time. And sometimes you have to be harsh. Sometimes you have to be collaborative. Sometimes you have to be you have to tell people when you think that they don't agree with you, it's an unpopular decision. But at the end of the day, it's about never giving up. And that for me is, no matter what industry you're in, that is for me a template for leadership.
Now, Mehmood, how can people connect with you, and where can they follow you?
Well, I mean, most directly, my email, of course, me.khan@sap.com, on Twitter @MehmoodK77, and on LinkedIn as well. So those are the three ones that I use most of the time.
And last but not least, Mehmood, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to give to future leaders that they should implement in their daily leadership?
Embrace challenges and embrace uncertainty. And I would say, do not be afraid to fail. I believe that 50%, there's not a scientific number, but I think half of the decisions that a leader is going to make is not going to be the right decision. But through making those wrong decisions, you will learn. And as long as you're learning, that's great. Many people are afraid to fail, and I think that, for me, is something that we should never lose. Experiment, fail, and that's how you learn.
Mehmood, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom. And thank you for helping us to build the future in a humane way, if I may say so.
Thank you.